Hey guys, welcome back to the checker games tutorial, the multiplayer checker games tutorial. In this episode, we input a name, so we create a name for the client. We also create that very nice connection we have in between the server and the client. As you can tell, I'm going to host something here. It says somebody has connected. That somebody is pretty much just myself. So we're creating a server, as you can tell right here in the scene. We're creating a server. We're also creating a client for myself. Right now, since we didn't input a name, client name is equal to host because I'm hosting the game. Now with another instance of this, let's just say this is mine, we're going to connect to this address. As you can tell, somebody else is connected right now. It doesn't know the name just yet, but that's for another episode. At least now we have our connection working in between those two guys. Of course, right now it doesn't seem like it's doing anything in the game, but it does quite a lot. It's able to communicate in between each other, which is, you know, the base of multiplayer. So guys, without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright guys, we have a lot of cool things to do today, and we are going to just jump right into it. So what I feel like doing is, since both my server and my client are under mono behavior, we can have it on object, which makes things a little bit easier to manage with the rest of the game, basically. So that's what I'm going to do. And we're going to open up the game manager. At the very top of the game manager, I'll have two public game objects. One of them being a server prefab, and the other one being the client prefab, of course. So let's type that down. And let me quickly check if I'm muted. No, I'm not muted. Good. Sometime I make like episode and I forget that my microphone is muted on OBS. I don't know why I'm sharing that with you. Okay, so let's get right back into it. I'm going to just go in the engine. We need some prefab for those. So right now, the only prefab we have is a black and a white piece. What we're going to do now is just create some game object, empty game object, and let's call this one server. Put the server script on it, and save it. So drag and drop this in the prefab. Now what I'm going to do is the same exact thing, but with the client. I always like to just clean up those prefab really quickly. Just put the position back to 0, 0, 0. Put the client script on it, and back in my prefab. Okay, now make sure none of those are actually on the scene, because we're going to be creating them while the game is running. To create them while the game is running, we need to have them as a reference on our game manager. So let's quickly just do that. Drag this here, and we're now going to get started with the connect to server button. So that's the second connect button, that's the big one. In here, what we're going to do is actually look for what is inside of the input. Now, if you guys remember, we named this, what's the name? We actually named this host input, and I'm going to be using the same exact name to find this object and then access the text component inside of it. So let's go back here, and we're going to say string host address is going to equal to localhost by default. So we're only putting that here, so if the user doesn't write anything, it's going to be defaulted on localhost. Now let's go ahead and check inside of the host input. We're going to do string, actually we're going to do game object.find, find the host input object, so the one that has my text, get component. We're getting the component of type input field, which we can't access right now. The reason being we don't have Unity Engine.ui at the top, so let's add this. So Unity Engine.ui. Now we have the input field. Let's check inside of that text component, and this is where we're gonna have information. So I'm going to flip things around actually. You know what? Let's forget about this. The default is going to be what is on that object. Okay, so this makes a little bit more sense. We're going to take this string. This string is going to equal what is inside of the input field. However, if there is nothing in the input field, so if host address is equal to nothing, then let's go ahead and just say host address is going to equal localhost or 127.0.0.1. That also works. Okay, so this is going to be a little bit better. Now we know what is inside of the text box, and we can just grab that information to connect somewhere. What we're going to do at this point is we're we're going to try and create our client. So again, another try catch exception E. We need to include system, most likely. Yep, using system. And then if we catch something, let's just write it down. So debug.log. I'm going to be lazy here and just write down the message. So what we do at this point, if we actually want to create a connection, is we have to create a client and then call the function we have on it, connect to server. This one is public, so all we really need here is a reference to that client. I'll just say client C is equal to instantiate, and then we instantiate the client prefab. Get a component on it. The component is going to be the client component, so we can just have our reference right away stored in here. We might have to keep this like as a class field instead of this try catch statement. We'll see a little bit later on if we do need to do that though. I'm not quite sure if we have to, but we'll see. Now we're going to be calling C connect to server with our string host address, and the actual port is 6321 or whatever you just put your port on. I didn't create another field in like in my menu. I didn't create another field for the port because this one, I mean, it's not being taken, and I don't really want to add much more complexity to connecting than it already is right now. So I'm just gonna default the port on 6321. So at this point, if connect to server doesn't work, we are going to exit this scope and go inside of the catch. So if we make it to the line 45 here, it means that we managed to connect. In which case, I will do a connect menu, set active, just put that on false. So I'm just going to shut down that menu, and then we're going to be connecting to the game. So we're going to be changing scene eventually. But for now, I think we're just going to leave it like that. This one looks good. And yeah. Okay, so we're able to connect, but we're not connecting to we're not connecting to anybody. There's no server ever. So we need to actually do something when we press on the host button. So what I'm going to do here is on top of the set active here, we are going to try and create our our server. So we're going to say server s is equal to instantiate. Just the same exact thing we done for the client. So instantiate this with the server prefab. Let's do a get component on it to get the server object. Once we have the server object, s.initialize. Alright, and then let's do a catch exception. Oops, catch exception. We do a debug.log of that message. Right. Okay, and that's really that's really all we need. And we're gonna give this a try now. There's a few errors here and there. We're gonna run into some problems, that is for sure, but at least we can give this a try. We try to connect. We crash here because there is no connection. No connection could be made because the target machine didn't want to, which is quite normal because no port is really listening for that. I mean, you're not really connecting to anybody. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna go under File, Build Settings. We're gonna be, well, first, since we're here, let's actually add those two scenes in here. Then we're going to go inside of player settings and make sure we run this in the background. Because if the server is like, if the window is not focused and the window is actually the server as well, then it needs to be running in the background anyway. I mean, you can't stop the server because you're not focusing yet. That's just stupid. So what I'm going to do is also build this. I'll just call this build. And we're going to try running two instances of the same game. One of them is going to be hosting and be a client at the same time that the other one is just going to be a client. So let's put that in window mode, something small. It might mess up with the UI. I have a good idea that it is going to mess up with the UI. And right now it didn't start on the right scene, so that kind of sucks. Well, let's go back and just make sure we reverse the order. The menu is first. And let's build that again quickly. Right, so we're playing this now. I'm going to go in the engine at the same time. The engine is going to be the host, and this is only going to be the client. So I'm going to host from here. And then at this point, I should be able to connect. And it says somebody has connected. So we've got our very, very first communication going on here. Took a little while, but you know, at least we have this working. So that is very, very good. And we are going to go ahead and just keep working on this until it looks better. Now, something that you might have understood, you might have catch while making this is that yes, we did have a host and yes, we did have a client. However, we want a total of 2 players. Right now we only have like 1 server just looking at everything and 1 client connecting, 1 player connecting. But the host should also be able to play because, you know, he's hosting the game. He should be the kind of master player here. The point I'm trying to make here is that the host doesn't have anything to play. The host is not a client. So we need to make sure that the host can actually play as well. What we're going to do here is just duplicate these 2 lines, or actually, you know what, let's grab it from the connect button, this one. Let's just grab these 2 lines right here and paste them. So yeah, we do create a server, everything is fine, but we also have to create a client. Now, as far as the host address, since you're connecting to yourself, it is always going to be localhost in this case. So we can just leave it like that, and we should actually have something calling the somebody has connected twice now. So I'm going to build this, press play, and now I'm going to connect on host. When hosting, we created the server and then somebody has connected. That somebody is myself. Now let's go in the other game, connect, and somebody else has connected. So as you can tell, we now have a total of 2 persons connected. And that is going to be it for the game manager. The rest of the logic is going to be done in the client side and also the server side. They're going to be done on both of those scripts here, those big scripts. But really, I think that's really it for the game manager. There is one thing I didn't do that we should do right now before it actually catch up to me later on, is actually give this client a name and also give him an option to change it. That'd be great as well. Yeah, so let's quickly just do that. We are going to create a new input field super fast, and I'm not quite sure where to put it. I'm not quite sure what would look good either, so what I'm going to do is just put it in the menu itself right here. So in that menu, I will create a new, say this is going to be a new input field, anchor it at the top left, why not? Maybe give it a small margin of 50 minus 50. So this would be at the very top hand side, and maybe height 50 as well. Of course, you just place this the way you want. I'm just quickly just trying to make something that won't look too bad, but I'm not quite good with art, so this might turn out to look awful. Change my placeholder for that. Oh yeah, we also have to change the text size. So when we write something in here, we need to change the size of that to 30 as well. Let's do the same thing for the host address. That's where we had our problem earlier. We're going to change that to 30 as well. So when we write something now, doesn't seem to work. Wait, hold on. Okay, so let's find it. It's under connect here, host input, and the text. There it is. And technically this should work now. Yeah, it does make a little bit more sense. Let's add a label on top of that. Why not? Label, why not? Quit. Let's add a label on top of that. So this is going to be the, where is it at? This is input field. This is going to be name input instead. And the label I'm going to give it is just simple text on top of it. So I'll put it at the same exact place. Just copy this rect transform, paste it on top of that, and just move it up a little bit. Give the font size 30, bold, and just name. Now remember that you can always be storing stuff like that, say in player pref, so when the player connects like more than once or boots your game more than once, you can keep its default name at all times. So this is something you could do just to make this a little bit better. We might do it towards the end of the tutorial, but of course our only goal right now is to make sure everything works and that it doesn't look too bad. Right, so I'm actually feeling like putting that at the bottom instead. This might actually look a little bit better. Okay, right, so as far as that name goes, we need to store it somewhere. Now, where exactly do we want to store it? We want to store it inside of C, I think. We want to store it inside of client. Now, client doesn't really have a definition for its name, so we're going to go ahead and just add one. So I'm inside of the client right now. I will actually do a public string client name. And don't give it anything default. I mean, if there's no client name, let's just leave it blank. Alright, so at this point in the connect to server button, we can go ahead and just say c.client name is equal to game object dot find the object that has the name NameInput, get component, get its input field component, and then on that input field there is a text. Now if c dot client name is equal to null, so if there's nothing, we are going to say c dot client name is equal to client by default. Let's copy over those lines for the host function. So when you're hosting, we're going to do the same exact thing. However, if there is no name in there, let's just put that on host by default. Okay, so this should actually do it for the names, I believe. I didn't really test it out. It's really hard to test it out right now. But I believe this is going to work. Oh yeah, we do get a problem here. When we try to connect, we get a object reference is not set to an instance. So we have a null reference going on. It's not crashing because we're on a try catch, but I mean, this is not good, so it stops the flow of our code. So what we're going to do here is, the reason it does that is because we're trying to access NameInput, but we disable it because it's part of the menu and we just disable the menu in general. So what we are going to do is actually, instead of keeping it as an object, we are going to, instead of accessing it using NameInput, be accessing it via its name text input field component. And we'll just do that by doing a public input field name input, and we're gonna go with that instead. So copy and paste name, you're gonna be copying it here just like that. Same thing for the other one. Oh wait, no, that's the host input. Don't change this one. You only need to change it here and also in the host button function right about there. Now let's set the reference to that. So on my game manager, grab the name input and just drag and drop it here. And it should actually work. So if we do connect now, it's grabbing the proper thing. However, we're connecting to nothing right now, so that's not going to work. One last thing I'd like to address before we move on to the next part of the tutorial is the fact that we have an error going on out here. So just look at our scene right now. If we do a host, we end up having a client in the server. That is definitely what we want. However, the client is not in the don't destroy unload, so it should be here instead. It should be in this scene. So first, we need to add the client to the don't destroy unload because we're going to be moving on to the next scene at this point. When another player connects, we're going to be moving on to the next scene, and we can't really allow this thing to be destroyed because it contains our logic, right? But the real problem we have is that when I press on cancel, they're still here. And that is really problematic because if we just click on the button again, we end up with 2 server and also 2 clients. So we're going to be tweaking our code a little bit just to make sure this does not happen. First, let's start by adding a don't destroy unload on the client. We don't really have a start in here, do we? Okay, since we don't really have a start, we are going to we're going to create one, why not? So we could put it in the connect to server as well, it's up to you, but I'll just do it clean and create a start here. So private void start, don't destroy unload this game object. Right, so that is our first problem solved. Now we need to do something else. When we press on the back button, so we do have our back button function somewhere here, right there. When we actually click on back, let's make sure we delete both the server and also the client. So what I'll do here is let's just store them inside of a field. Server s is equal to find object of type. I'm gonna be really lazy here. Find object of type server, and if s is not equal to null, then destroy s.gameObject. Same exact thing for the client. So simply copy and paste, change s for c, find object of type client, and if c is not equal to null, destroy c.gameObject. So this little quick fix here, and we should actually be good to go for the next tutorial. The next tutorial is about creating that those messages we're going to be sending, because we're going to be sending like some really very specific messages that the game has to parse in some certain way. So that is what we're going to be doing in the next episode, guys. And thanks a lot for watching. Thanks a lot for just leaving comments, leaving likes. All those things you do just to help me make this channel a little bit better every single day. So guys, thanks once more, and I will be seeing you in the next episode.